on India Upfront, our focus is going to be the big verdict which is coming out from the Supreme Court. And it has been supreme vindication, if you can call it that, for Modi Sarkar's demonetization. Well, the Supreme Court has upheld its 2016 notification with 4:1 majority, dismissing all the 58 petitions challenging demonetization. Now, most of the justices held the decision to be well-intended and lawful. The purpose of countering the evils of black money and terror funding were found to be valid as well, and the actions of the centre were found to be in accordance with the RBI Act, which allows essentially the government such powers, says the Supreme Court. In fact, after the approval of the RBI board, it says that it is not unlawful for the centre to put out this notification. Well, it's pertinent, however, to point out that the scope of the Apex Court was to weigh the legality of this exercise of demonetization rather than the efficacy of the policy itself. Now remember, the petitions had highlighted the human pain and suffering after demonetization, but the Apex Court dismissed it by saying that the hardships of the public doesn't make the decision bad in law. That distinction is, viewers, very, very important. In fact, here's what the majority view of the Supreme Court bench said. It said, the first excerpt coming in from the order is that demonetization is not flawed and it satisfies the proportionality test. It is a reasonable nexus, it says, between objectives and the means to achieve it. The objective, of course, has been stated to be that to counter the evils of black money, of terror financing, as well as counterfeit currency. It has also gone on to say it's not relevant if demonetization objective was achieved or not. That's not within the ambit of this hearing. In fact, it goes on to say that hardships faced by the public doesn't make it bad in law. At times, individual interests must yield to the larger interest. Our interpretation of the RBI Act is pragmatic and not pedantic. It goes on to say that the records have shown centre and the RBI's consultative process, that the government's decision taken after the RBI board's approval. Also, that the RBI is an inbuilt safeguard against the centre's power. The Supreme Court also said that the court cannot supplant the wisdom of the executive with its own wisdom, that it would be disastrous if news of such a measure was to be leaked in advance. It also went on to say it cannot find fault in the decision-making process merely since the proposal came from the centre and not the RBI, as were the earlier two demonetization bids in India. In fact, the only dissenting view was that of Justice Nagaratna. In fact, she has said, when calling it illegal and vitiated, she says that the action of demonetization by the centre is unlawful and vitiated. Demonetization of all note series by the centre is more serious than any specific series by the bank. This, of course, is in reference to the two previous demonetizations which have happened in India. That was initiated by the bank and the decision was at the time not by the centre. In fact, she went on to say that as per Section 26, Part 2 of the RBI Act, the proposal should be RBI's and not the centre's. But there was no time for an independent application of mind by the RBI. She's also commented on how the centre of the time had bypassed the parliament by saying it should be done via legislation, not an executive notification. Any legislation which is made in secrecy is an ordinance. The Parliament's views are critical and of utmost importance. Now, this is something that the opposition has highlighted and underscored time and again all day today. She's also spoken, however, and this is interesting, that demonetization was well-intended. In fact, in the courtroom, the justice had said that the measure was well-intentioned and well thought of. It targeted evils such as black money, terror funding and counterfeiting. It's unlawful purely, on her view, unlawful purely on legal grounds and not for its objectives which was stated at the time of demonetization. Then she goes on to say, but we cannot give relief or restore the status quo ante as of now in today's day and age. After all, it was a decision which was taken in 2016. So, in fact, here are the differing views of the two judges.
The court cannot substitute its judgment for that of the legislature or the executive. And we have also scrutinized the record, and after examining the record, we have found that the judicial decision-making process cannot be flawed merely because the procedure has emanated from the central government.
As held herein before, the proposal for demonetization can emanate either from the central government or from the central board of the bank. It is, however, necessary to contrast the proposal where the bank recommends demonetization. It is, in my view, only for a particular series of banknotes of a particular denomination, as specified in the recommendation made under subsection 2 of section 26 of the Act. The word any in subsection 2 cannot be read to mean all. Therefore, demonetization of banknotes at the behest of the central government is a far more serious issue.
However, the opposition has pointed to the dissenting view, hailing Justice Nagaratna as a brave woman. They say that demonetization failed since it bypassed the parliament and even failed to fulfill its very purpose of wiping out terror funding and black money. Listen in.
We all have to respect the judgment. That is a different issue. But I personally feel that it is a monumental blunder, whatever our Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has said. I fully stand by it. It has spoiled the economy. It has spoiled the strength of a common man.
पर लीगल प्रोसीजर के कॉम्प्लिकेशन जो हुए हैं उसमें तो कुछ सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने अभी तक जितना मैंने देखा है, ये बात तो अपनी जगह कायम है कि इकोनॉमी खत्म हुई, उसके बाद कमजोर पड़ी। क्या क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म रुका? जो वादे थे क्या कुछ रुका? जो हार्डशिप हुई थी जनता की वो कुछ कम हुई? उसके जो कॉम्प्लिकेशन हुए, उसका जो नुकसान देश को उठाना पड़ा, आम जनता को उठाना पड़ा, उस पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने जस्टिफाई नहीं किया।
अब आप सुप्रीम कोर्ट के फैसले को लेकर आप बाजा बजाइए, मगर ये सच्चाई है नहीं। हम जो मुद्दे आपके ये जो सामने रखे आपके, अजीम प्रेमजी यूनिवर्सिटी की रिपोर्ट बोल रही कि 50 लाख लोगों की नौकरी चले गई, 100 लोग मर गए, 99.30% डीमोनेटाइज पैसा जो हुआ तो सिस्टम में वापस आ गया। अब ये क्या है बताओ आप?
In fact, claiming supreme vindication, the BJP has lashed out at demonetization's doubters for continuing to spread canards about the government decision, which led to what they call an increase in income tax as well as collection and digital revolution in India.
सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने जो फैसला किया है वो एक बहुत ऐतिहासिक फैसला, उसका हम सम्मान करते हैं और ये फैसला देश हित में है और एक देश हित में किए गए फैसले को कोर्ट ने सही माना है। राहुल गांधी जी से एक सवाल, आपने देश भर में जो कैंपेन किया नोटबंदी के खिलाफ, आप सॉरी बोलेंगे जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने इसको सही माना?
और जिस तरह से डिमोनेटाइजेशन को लेकर के कंफ्यूजन पैदा करने की, कंट्राडिक्शन पैदा करने की, गुमराह करने की कोशिश कांग्रेस पार्टी हो या अन्य पार्टियों ने की, वो एक बार फिर से एक्सपोज हुई।
In fact, here are some of the facts that the BJP is pointing towards. When it comes to the indicator of the use of notes, it has increased by 70% after demonetization. What are the facts which are supporting it? Is that the currency circulation doesn't reflect the reality and that cash payments have declined from 88%, which was in financial year of 2016, to 20% in financial year of 2022. Also, that the rise in currency was due to the disinvestment rush which had happened. Remember all of this due to the precautionary demand, they say, for the notes during the pandemic. Also, it goes on to say that the value of the ATM withdrawals were constant since 2016. It did not either increase or decrease. Another indicator that the BJP is alluding towards is the increase in digital transactions amongst the young. They are saying that cash payments declined from 88% to 20% between 2016 to 22, calling it a digital revolution. Also, that paper checks and other paper-backed transactions declined from 46% in financial year 2016 to 20% till now. In fact, the UPI transactions, it says, has also increased and have hit 84 lakh crore rupees in the financial year of 2022. Another indicator that the BJP is pointing towards is how after demonetization, the fintech industry saw massive growth as well. That India's fintech adoption rate became 87% when at a time globally it is only at 64%. You contrast the two figures there. Also, more than 6,636 fintech startups came up in India, and it is expected to now grow at 20% to reach $138 billion in 2023. Another indicator that the BJP is pointed towards is the GDP growth, which has improved in 2019, the years which had followed it. In fact, saying that the GDP growth in 2016 to 2017, that was the year of the demonetization, was at 8.3%. The indicator of cash in housing market also reduced. In fact, for this, the BJP has cited that there was 75 to 80% reduction in cash transactions since demonetization. So what does it all mean? Let's throw it open to our panelists. Joining us today on India Upfront, GVL Narasimha Rao, BJP national spokesperson. There's Ishkaran Bhandari joining us, a Supreme Court advocate. Rishi Bagre is here with us, an economist. Tanveer Ahmed of the JDS joining us. Sanjay Jha, an author, as well as Sanjay Hegde, a senior Supreme Court advocate. First, I'm going to come across to you, GVL Narasimha Rao, because a lot has been said about your government, the policy, and it has been continuing since 2016 and till date. Even today, there are questions and doubters who have doubted your demo policy. Today, after the Supreme Court has said that it is not flawed and it is not against the law, would you look at this as a vindication? Do you think this is going to silence your opponents and critics?
Surely. Good evening, Meghna, to you and all the panelists. There was a lot of furor and a lot of propaganda against the government by particularly the Congress party, which criticized it, called it unlawful, unconstitutional and whatnot. Today, after the court vindication, a 4:1 judgment by an apex court panel, I think the Congress party must at least have the courtesy to accept that their comments were flawed. They must accept, because if anything is unlawful, it is not the Congress party or its president who will preside over a decision. Any question of legality or constitutionality, the only place where it can be really tested is the Supreme Court of India, the ultimate arbiter. So the Congress party and all those who campaigned, who carried out propaganda against demonetization, today must actually admit they were at fault, number one. Number two, demonetization, it has helped the formalization of economy in a big way, digitization of economy in a big way. It has had spin-offs well beyond even intended objectives. I think GST, demonetization and government's legislation on black money, all this together actually worked, have acted as a package of initiatives to bring about transparency in India's economy. I think this is the one demo has had a major contribution in this regard.
Right. Sanjay Jha, in that case, let me come to you, because very categorically the majority view of the Supreme Court has said demo is not flawed, satisfied proportionality test. There's reasonable nexus between the objectives and the means to achieve it, and it is not relevant if demonetization's objective is met or not met. That is not what the court was looking at. Today, Sanjay Jha, do you think Rahul Gandhi and the other opposition leaders who hit the streets all throughout India against demonetization and the move will come out and apologize as the BJP is demanding?
Well, I think if anybody needs to apologize to the country, it has to be the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, and the BJP that backs him. Dr. Manmohan Singh was absolutely right, so clairvoyant when he said this is an organized loot and a legalized plunder. Now, I heard Ravi Shankar Prasad's press conference, and I think my friend GVL does have a good understanding of economics. So let me tell you the one data that the BJP hides from the people of India. You know, Dr. Manmohan Singh predicted a loss of GDP between 1.5% to 2%. You know how much that aggregates to? Around 2.5 lakh crores, 2,50,000 crores is the loss of income for India. What does that mean? That's almost like 4 times the budget of Manrega. That's almost like 7 to 8 times the budget that India made for vaccines, wasted in the course of just 1 year. But look at the impact of it that the demonetization has had. The economy, you look at the GDP figures after that, the GDP has never recovered because you destroyed the informal sector, the data of which is not captured for years on end in our GDP figures, because GDP figures are basically and some kind of a conflation based on the organized sector's results, which is why at the end of the day, if the Indian GDP today over the last 3 years has grown at 2.5%, it is a demonetization and a terribly ham-handed execution of the GST.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Sanjay Jha. Sorry to interrupt you, but very categorically, the Supreme Court has also said that it is not relevant if demonetization objectives were achieved or not. Merely because citizens suffered through hardship, it should not be grounds to hold the notification as bad in law. That's what the Supreme Court was looking at.
Very brief.
Well, let me tell you, the Supreme Court has commented on a procedure. But look at the human cost, 140 lives gone. Number 2, a very important data that you cannot ignore. 99.3% of the money came back into the system. So the question that the BJP needs to answer, where did the black money go? Where are the people you are going to pay? And that is the real deep mystery that we need to solve.
GVL, I want this. I want a quick answer from GVL on that. 99.3% of the money came back into circulation. If it didn't help in curbing black money, then it's a futile exercise, they say.
No, Meghna,
it is a fraud.
No, the idea was not. The idea was to find who owns this money. Show me one document or one objective where it was said we don't expect money to come back into the banking system. By 99% when the money is deposited, and that amount had to be, the sources of that deposit had to be provided by the concerned depositors. More than 3 lakh crore of that amount, and more than 3 lakh bank accounts which were not genuine corporates. They were actually shut down. There was a Swachh Bharat. Actually, demonetization is a Arthik Swachh Bharat. Is a financial cleansing,
in that case,
financial cleansing of the economy.
Isn't it what the government had said? That one of the aims of demonetization was to curb black money. Even though today they can come out and say that it was to find out where this money was. It was not to stop the money which was there in circulation. Does it add up to what the government had said in its affidavit? Ishkaran.
See, the problem with opposition to demonetization was that they have made a scrambled egg out of it. They don't know whether they're opposing to the legality of it, the economic impact of it, or the political impact of it. Let us be clear step by step. Legally, the Supreme Court, by a constitution bench after arguments in length, has come to a conclusion that the government was entitled to do it. The government did it in a proper manner. If hardships were caused, that is unfortunate, but that cannot be a ground for striking a decision down. Every governmental decision may cause hardship to certain people, which is a cost which is unfortunate, but cannot be at the root of whether the decision is legal or not legal. When it comes to political argument, which the Congress is entitled to make, but unfortunately that political argument also failed, because 2016 the demonetization happened, and who best to decide except the voters of this country? 2017 they won a sweeping victory in Uttar Pradesh, a key state. 2019 they won a record victory again. So politically also their argument has fallen flat at the discretion of the voter, which is finally the ultimate judge. When it comes to economy, of course there are going to be two views. There will be a view which said that this was not a good decision. There will be a view which said it was a good decision. But again, the pain of a bad decision is felt by a voter. The voter is emphatically answering that they didn't feel the pain. They felt it's a good decision. I remember a former finance minister in parliament mocking the digital process and saying, how would a poor aloo seller, how would a poor person be able to participate in this economy and go anywhere? And you see how they are participating. In fact, India is becoming a world leader. This was pre-COVID. After COVID, every economy is going cashless. You have to tap your credit card or debit card anywhere in the world. India was before on this aspect. India recognized this aspect. COVID obviously helped it, but the direction India chose was the right direction in this globalized world of going cashless.
Sanjay Hegde, I'll come to you because Ishkaran is talking about the ambit of the Supreme Court's verdict today. Is the opposition making a scrambled egg out of it, as he calls it, a scrambled egg about what they want to oppose? The legality, which is what the Supreme Court was looking into, or the fallout, which is a completely different debate?
Well, the Supreme Court does not actually look into the merits of the decision, whether it is in this constitutional case or in ordinary administrative law also. It only looks as to whether the process was correct or not.
Yes.
Now, 4 judges hold that the process was correctly followed, that, the proposal need not emanate only from the RBI, it could have emanated from elsewhere. But ultimately, as long as the RBI was on board, everything was kosher. The dissenting judge says that, look, you can't do these things under 26(2) of the RBI Act only by executive action. You needed legislation. This is somewhat similar to what the UK Supreme Court held in the Brexit case. You must remember that the government of Britain wanted to walk out of Brexit using just the treaty provisions.
Right.
The UK Supreme Court said, no, you must go to Parliament and get parliamentary approval. So that is the kind of line that the dissenting judge has upheld.
But Sanjay Hegde, isn't it true that the dissenting judge, in the order copy, it also very clearly said that even if there were 2 other precedents, doesn't mean that the government does not have the right to bring about a demonetization for the entire series. Doesn't rule out that it cannot. Sanjay Hegde.
Well, Megha, I have some problem with the sound quality, so I'm making some assumptions about your question. So the point is that courts don't get into merits. Courts can only look at the procedure. Procedure has been found okay, but politics will continue. Sometimes court decisions become the starting point of politics. You must remember in the US, for instance, the Supreme Court decision on abortion created a huge wave in politics. Here, the Supreme Court did not intervene in 2016. 6 years later, it has reviewed the process. It actually had doubts as to whether it needed to get into this question at all. At an earlier stage of the proceedings, the Supreme Court said maybe this question is academic now. Right. However, for the sake of the future, the 5 judges have gone into it. 4 have held one way. The dissenting judgment will also be studied with great depth if any future government were to contemplate this.
How important, in that case, let me take that across to Rishi Bagri. How important is what the dissenting judge has said? Because at the end of it, if you look at demonetization, you had about 100 people who had unfortunately died right after that, as per the opposition parties. The Congress also says that about 50 lakh jobs have been lost. Can we still call demonetization a success, or is it not within the purview? Because what we have is facts versus facts. BJP is furbishing its own set of facts, then you have the opposition furbishing its own set of facts. Rishi Bagre.
No, for those who says the demonetization was a failure, no, we need to see that we have become the 5th largest economy in the world. I mean, from the 10th largest 7-8 years back. And this is the fastest jump in the ranking. Need to see that. And we have become the fastest growing economy from the fragile file economy in 2013. Our digital economy now contributes almost 1/3 of the entire total economy. The digital transaction constitutes almost 80% of the entire transaction. We contribute 40% to the total digital transaction in the world. 40%, every 100 digital transaction which takes place in the world, 40 comes from India. So you can imagine what kind of transaction we are. Now you see our tax collection has gone up. Our car sales has gone up. Our economy is doing better. Our inflation is lower than the US and the Eurozone. This is a fact which was unthinkable. There was a time when the inflation was a sticky inflation and we were having a double-digit inflation during the UPA time from 2009 to 2014. We have seen those double-digit inflation. Now the inflation is lower than the USA, lower than the Europe region, which was unheard of. So we are doing better. Now, my friends are talking about the plunder and organized loot. I mean, the same Manmohan Singh ji, the respectable Manmohan Singh ji, sat silently over the 2G, over the CWG, over the Damat ji, over the coal scam, over the Emperor scam, over the Scorpion scam, over the others society scam, over the Augusta scam. He never said anything.
Rubbish.
But when something good thing happened, then he is saying that this thing. But we also have to see the facts. The facts are that we have more taxpayers. We have added 3 crore more taxpayers to the net. We have a much affordability for the buying property has increased. If you see in last 7-8 years, our inflation has been lower. Our all the workers are getting the money through the ECS, the direct, earlier they used to get through the cash. Now every worker is getting through the ECS. Even a small worker, even the Manrega people are getting their money from the online transactions. So, and we have a less Naxal terrorism. You see, the Naxal footprint has actually shrunk, and the terrorism activities has also actually, in the multi-year low. So you can see the numbers, you can see the things.
Because already you have the opposition coming out and calling Justice Nagaratna as a brave woman who had the tenacity to come out and speak the truth. But do you think it is reading it very selectively what the dissenting view is? Because she's also said, and that is something none of the opposition leaders are talking about, the justice has also said that the measure was well-intentioned and well thought of, and it targeted evils such as black money, terror funding, as well as counterfeiting, that it was well-intentioned. This is a part that the opposition leaders simply don't want to talk about. Why? How can you read the dissenting view selectively?
Firstly, let me just pinpoint the couple of mistakes which is done by Congress party. This was not, demonetization issue was not an issue to be taken to Supreme Court. It was to be taken at People's Court. See, People's Court is the biggest answer. Winning election is absolutely not a parameter saying that your government is absolute. Let me answer, please. You have given enough time to all my learned panelists. Let me have my time. It's not the only parameter. Because if at all you see more than 50 lakhs job lost, it is not the report from Congress or opposition, it is the report which is coming from the central agencies. And second thing, what is the amount which was lost by the unorganized sectors, the farmers? Absolutely humongous, horrendous, and the government failed to absolutely take any drastic. And the gentleman, Mr. Rishi, coming and saying that India is growing, it is as good as saying that, last year I was 49, today, this year I am 50, and we are giving credit to Mr. Modi. India was due to grow. It is not because of Modi. India was absolutely on that parameter for a pretty long period. India has the capacity, has the tenacity to grow. It is not because of Modi. Modi tried to bring the entire Indian economy down, but still the vibrant class, the middle class wanted to excel because their lives were in very, very bad shape. All the measures were absolutely wrong. How did we implement demonetization? Do we have any shame to say that 100 people lost their life rather than coming here and apologizing in front of the nation? Today, my good friend GBL Narasimha Rao, who's a very, very nice man and a clean soul, today is saying that nothing happened.
But Tanveer Ahmed, one quick question to Tanveer Ahmed. How can you say that polls is not an indicator? If there was so much misery, Modi government would have been voted out. It didn't. How can you explain that, perhaps?
No, I just want
Babu
to say...
Babu Rajendra Prasad has said, and I want to say, that politicking is done for next general election, politics is done for next generation. They have done politicking and they have done very well. For the politics for the next generation, they have absolutely failed.
Answer that, GVL, that polls are not the only parameter for the efficacy of a policy.
The Congress, the JDS seems to have a very weird logic. So if polls and if people's verdict is not to reflect public mood, tell me what reflects. You want to conduct propaganda, you substantiate, no, you will speak the same lie 100 times and you want people to believe it. You will say 50 lakh people have lost jobs. Where have they lost jobs? You see, the polls conducted in Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand, they were held barely 3 months after demonetization. Demonetization happened on November 8th, and then polls happened in early February. Early February. And one reason, let me tell you, one major reason why we won Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand so handsomely in 2017, early 2017, was demonetization. In fact, but for demonetization, we could have barely got a simple majority in Uttar Pradesh. I traveled extensively in UP on the eve of polls. There was a total endorsement of the electorate. And the farmers on whom you are shedding tears, crocodile tears, they were extremely pleased. And workers who have not been paid by the sugarcane factories for several months, all their dues were paid in a jiffy because people were sitting on large amounts of cash. They immediately paid off all those to whom they owed money. So this was an endorsement. UP Uttarakhand result is resounding.
Sanjay Jha doesn't agree with you. Sanjay Jha doesn't agree with you. Sanjay Jha, isn't it also true that the court very categorically in the past also, your charges and attacks on the BJP have fallen flat when they reach the Supreme Court? For example, Rafale, Chaukidar Chor Hai, the attacks which were made at the time of GST, the PMLA amendment, there are several such examples that I give to you where the Supreme Court has merely dismissed a lot of these attacks which have been made for political reasons, as the BJP calls it.
Megha, I love the way the BJP lies through its teeth on a popular program like yours. I mean, they really insult the intelligence of the TV watchers of your program. Now, GVL mentions Uttarakhand and Uttar Pradesh. Aren't you insulting Punjab, Goa and Manipur, GVL, which did not vote for you? So they did not vote for demonetization, my friend. And please recognize that you have lost more state elections after that than you actually have won them. But the critical point, the economist Mr. Bagri talked about certain data. He forgets the basics. India became the third largest economy in purchasing power parity in 2011, Mr. Bagri, under the time of the UPA 11 years ago. Third largest. And by the way, it became a middle-income country. You don't even know your facts. But let me answer. Let me answer the second point. No, I don't think you know your facts. Said it's in purchasing power parity. It became a middle-income country. You need to know that. The larger point: cash has now become double of what it was pre-demonetization. Can you imagine what we have reached? And most important question that we need to ask this government: where is the black money? That is the question that the people of India want to ask you. Because you have pulverized the economy, you have destroyed the informal sector, you have devastated jobs, you have demolished India's core foundations of agriculture. You saw how the farmers protested. And where is the black money? Is it coming to you in electoral bonds, GVL? Is that why the political campaign funding is kept opaque? We need to ask these questions of you. Because this is the biggest scam in India's...
I'll allow Rishi Bagri to counter you because those are direct questions that you put to it. Rishi, you want to come in? The proof of the pudding is in its eating, says Sanjay Jha. Look what has happened after demon.
I'm put the hard data on ground.
Where? What hard data did you put there? This is all part of your propaganda.
He says this is hard data. There are data giving out for both. Rishi Bagri, being the economist, I'm quickly bringing him in.
I just want to say one thing. I mean, Sanjay ji is saying that electoral bond is the biggest, one of the biggest what you have. Then why the Congress is accepting electoral bonds? It has just in the last disclosure, it has accepted 700 crores worth of electoral bond. It should shun the electoral bond. It should not take it should not touch the electoral bond from the barge pole. But it is accepting all the donation from the electoral bond. So it should not say all these things. No, it looks very funny.
If you are an economist,
Rishi, 95% goes to the BJP, man. You know that.
Not a pseudo-economist.
95%.
No, don't be pseudo-economist, sir.
BJP gets a lion's share of the electoral bonds. That's not we are discussing. But Sanjay Hegde, I'm going to come back to you because this is an important point and we are returning to this again and again. And you being a lawyer as well, you must explain to us because the Supreme Court very categorically said it is not relevant whether or not demonetization has achieved its stated objectives or not, that at the end of it doesn't matter, but the intent was well intended. It had the right intentions, whether or not it managed to achieve what it went out, even though BJP today seems to be changing the goalpost as to what the aims of that were. Do you think that BJP has done what it has said, that we went out with a good intention, and of course the rest of it lies outside the ambit of the Supreme Court's verdict today? Sanjay Hegde.
Well, the Supreme Court has for more or less now put a seal on this controversy in that it has judicially reviewed it. Says like there's nothing much that the judiciary can do about do about it, because the ultimate remedy is in appealing to the people if some decision is particularly unwise. I've been hearing all this about contrary views from both sides. They are all political people. They have a message to send out politically as well. This is a particular administrative decision, the wisdom of which the courts can't get into. As to whether it is wise, personally, I don't think it was very wise. It was sudden, it was brutal, and the consequences have not entirely panned out the way it was originally planned. It is almost as if they set out to make an omelette, but then it became a scrambled egg, and they say, okay,
the court has very categorically today said, the court has very categorically said, and this is very interesting, is that the RBI and the government willfully misled the Supreme Court. For this, they have furbished an RTI because they have decided, and this is something even the dissenting view of Justice Nagaratna had said, there is no time for an independent application of mind by the RBI. Do you think somewhere the Supreme Court was not given the complete facts, as even an RTI in the past has already revealed? Ishkaran?
Yes. Am I visible?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah. So let me first make 3 short points. I was going to compliment my friend Tanveer Ahmed when he said that Congress is confused and it put the case to Supreme Court. But then he went into his usual spiel of how Modi is trying to bring the economy down. I started by saying Congress is confused because this was a political issue which they tried to make a legal issue. But to say that the Supreme Court was not given full facts when there were multiple petitioners with excellent senior counsels in the court who argued at length is, I think, a very unfair attack by the opposition if they are still making it, because not only are they doubting the Supreme Court, they are doubting the counsels who argued on the behalf of the people challenging the notification. Last point I would like to make, it is not only that the Supreme Court went into procedure, they also said that there was a reasonable nexus with the objective sought to be achieved. That is, demonetization had a reasonable nexus with what it wanted to do. And lastly, you can rely on a dissenting judgment, but that's for scholarly and academic purposes. Like Congress keeps saying, BJP did not get 51% vote share, even though it has swept the elections and formed a single party government. So those are academic arguments. People are entitled to make them, but the reality is Supreme Court has upheld the demonetization process, even though I think the Congress or any opposition should have never really made such a big deal about it, because the people have already voted on the issue.
Sanjay Jha, you disagree. However, isn't it true that the records have shown, as per the Supreme Court, records have shown that CENTA and RBI had a consultative process. If everything was done as per due diligence, which was done as per the process which is recommended under the RTI Act, is the Congress making a huge brouhaha over nothing? Much about nothing ho gaya hai.
Megha, first and foremost, a big thank you for giving me an opportunity to come back before I leave. I really appreciate that. I need to say that to you. Short answer. Governor Raghuram Rajan is on record to say that he advised the government when they broached this issue with him in February of 2016. He went on record to say it was a verbal conversation. Nothing was in writing. But he said, I do not agree that you should go ahead with demonetization. He also said that is the view of the RBI. So both the governor of the RBI and the RBI were against demonetization. And you know that after he left, you had Mr. Urjit Patel coming in. And I think, therefore, the dissenting statement becomes very crucial, that this government basically bulldozed demonetization, did not give RBI a chance to respond, did not renew Mr. Raghuram Rajan's term, which is normally almost like a template.
gave Mr. Urjit Patel hardly any breathing time to probably look at the pros and cons, and which is why India landed in a rabbit hole where the economy was concerned. That's my sole point here. And thank you very much for giving me a chance to say this.
Always a pleasure to hear your dissenting view on this as well, Sanjay Jha. GVL, very categorically, just as Nagaratna had said, no time for independent exercise of mind by the RBI was given by the centre. Your answer to that?
No, Meghana, I think you have to look at a judgment in totality when 5 judges of the same level, same rank, Supreme Court judges, when they give a judgment, you cannot look at a dissenting note in isolation and miss the real big point. The 4:1 is a majority decision by a wide majority, 80%, 4 out of 5. So obviously, every dissenting judge comments will have to be examined, but you cannot make the Congress party is wanting to hang by that dissenting judgment and also some observations of it. Even that judgment was not supportive of Congress party's arguments. Even that judgment said technically there is nothing unlawful. So the Congress party is only indulging in some kind of face saver by latching on to some comments made by the dissenting judge.
Tanveer Ahmed, is that what's happening? The opposition clutching on two straws with what the dissenting view is. After all, let's not forget 4 other judges had a completely different view on this.
See, I think whether it is Sanjay Jha, me or anybody from opposition is absolutely not commenting anything about Supreme Court. Whether it is dissenting or whether it was in favor. But however, we have to really see people's apathy. We have to see where the economy is, where it could have been had demonetization would have not been done. They have absolutely killed the unorganized sector. They have absolutely killed a lot of aspiration. That year, farmers really struggled to sell their produce. However, history is definitely not going to forgive them because of demonetization. If at all, by taking what my good friend Ishkaran Bhandari and GVL said, that way Nehru is a great prime minister because he was the prime minister for 27 long years. Do you want to really say that Nehru had absolutely a golden era? Winning election is absolutely not a way to really say that this is a good government or bad government. History is going to repeat. History is going to tell that this was a blunder which has really brought the Indian economy to doldrums, and you are the reason for killing the aspirations of this country, great country. But however, the middle class have really taken the burden of taking the economy on the tracks again.
Okay.
Don't take the credit for the common man which has put efforts to bring the economy. Modi and its government has to take no credit for it.
GVL, quickly, history will judge you and not just this one verdict which is coming out from the Supreme Court today. You have a larger judgment which is coming.
No, the People's Court have repeatedly supported the government on demonetization and several other things. But the opposition, the Congress, the JDS and others would want to believe their own fallacies, their own imaginary hardship. Hardship was certainly there, but this kind of massive job losses, destroying of economy, these are all imagery that they wanted to conjure to scare people and to lure them into supporting the opposition.
In fact, one of these things, Ishkaran, one quick word, one of these things that the opposition till date is saying is that the Supreme Court itself was misled, that there were facts of what Raghuram Rajam had said at the time which was hidden.
How was it hidden from Supreme Court? It was open hearing by the best counsels of the country that the Congress and the opposition could have. So why didn't they raise it? I'm finding it very surprising that this sort of an attack is being made on the judicial process of the country, not only on the Supreme Court, but on the counsels who are arguing the case. Why could Mr. Rajan not file an affidavit if they wanted to? Or why could they not argue that? So frankly, as I said, Congress has scrambled their arguments. They don't make sense. One day they say Rafael mein chori hui, then they forget it. One day they get up and say Notbandi mein chori hui, then they forget it. The problem is that because they are losing elections, I think they have lost their mind also.
Attacks keep coming and going. Sanjay Hegde, I'll give you the final word. Do you think opposition somehow seems to be digressing? Especially when it comes to demonetization, should the matter just end now with the Supreme Court? It's been 2016. Even the judges have said nothing much can be done at this time.
Well, actually, nothing much could have been done at this point, because if the Supreme Court were to have said that no, demonetization is wrong, it could not have remonetized the currency which had already been collected.
They wanted, they wanted relief, however, most of the petitions.
No, it could have given a declaration for the future, but it could not have really done anything in terms of bringing back status quo ante. Suddenly, those few 500 rupee notes of old which remained in somebody's bank locker and could not be surrendered in time. If that was to be made legal tender, then you would have had other consequences.
So very interestingly, as one of the panelists said, where the Supreme Court verdict ends, that's where the politics has begun. Perhaps what we are doing is all building the scrambled egg. It's perhaps time to accept what the Supreme Court has said and then move on. However, thank you so much, gentlemen, for having this very interesting debate on demonetization, but more importantly, the fallout of it politically.